We've been immersed in that whole idea of courage and hope all weekend, and I am amazed at the courage of the man who addressed God with a question. Now, the question didn't have anything to do with courage or with hope. It had to do with mathematics, God's mathematics. And perhaps you've heard this interchange. The courageous man speaks to God and says, God, what is 1,000,000 years like to you? God replies, 1,000,000 years is like 1 second. The man continues, God, what is $1,000,000 like to you? God's answer is, $1,000,000 is like 1 penny. The man musters all his courage and asks, God, can I have a penny? God answers without hesitation, just a second. The gospel today is not about mathematics. It's about the human need to understand God, to fathom God's love and generosity. And it's about the courage to hope that the love which we receive will be given in mercy. These are very difficult times, especially with the economy. And Sister Eileen reminded us yesterday of the statistics of those who are currently out of work. We have many unemployed, and those who do have jobs are working even harder. I read an article that said that many companies have let go of many employees, and they have made the people they've held on to cover all the ground that the other people had been covering. And now they're saying that it's okay, so people are going to be working harder and fewer people are going to be working. But even if times weren't as difficult as they are, we still admire hard workers, and we don't admire shirkers. For we have this kind of innate sense of what is fair. If a person has a job to do, they should do it, we believe, and do it properly, and then receive fair compensation. So today, when we hear the parable about the vineyard workers, we tend to identify with the people that have worked all day long. At least I do. Remember in the gospel today, they said to the landowner, hey, we bore the day's heat. We were in the middle of the sun working all day. Those who came on at 5 o'clock got the same pay that we did. Who hasn't worked like that? And even right now, doesn't feel, I work harder than he does, or than she does. When those people in Jesus' parable who worked the whole day see the latecomers, and they see that they've received that same pay, they are very, very upset. More than upset, they're angry. And they say, these last you have made first. It's as if the landowner broke some kind of a contract. And I actually think there was a contract, but it was in the landowner's mind. Because all the day, those people who were working had in their mind that they were going to get a certain amount. But in the landowner's mind, he was willing to give all that he had to anyone who worked. And he did what was just in his own mind, but not in our minds. And that's where it becomes difficult. Now, just for a moment of a glimpse of the parable, we sit and we look at those people who were hired last and we say, yeah, they come out at 5 o'clock looking for a job. But scholars tell us the people who were hired last were probably the weakest. They were probably the least desirable. So in the morning, the strong people, the young people were all hired. As the day went on, there were still people who didn't have jobs. They were people like the elderly, the disabled, children, and even women. Now, in our world, we have a kind of saying, a fair day's pay for a fair day's work. But Jesus isn't talking about how we treat our employees. He's not the human resource director in Galilee. What Jesus is doing, if we get it, is describing how God acts toward us. How things are in the kingdom of heaven, where God's influence takes precedence, where God's power is at work. In the kingdom of heaven, judging from today's parable, the guiding principle is not so much justice as generosity. We don't like that so much. It doesn't set well with us. But when we think about the parable, I think about myself. I don't know about you. Some days I do a good job. I work hard. But some days I invest less effort in what I have to do. And there are times I know I could have done a lot better. What about those other times in our lives? The times we like to forget. The times when we should have made different or better choices, but we didn't. How is that all going to be evaluated in the end? If God were sitting there with the scale of justice tipping one way or the other, it scares me to think which side I will be on most of the time. God doesn't act as we would act. And what I say to myself is, thank God, God doesn't act the way we act. With God, all the rules and the laws for handing out awards strictly according to behavior are just put aside. For some strange reason, unknown, unexplainable to us, those who are in the greatest need receive more than they expect or have earned. In that kind of a world, what would hold us back from approaching God, who is offering us grace? And yet there are so many people who feel at odds in their relationship with God. If they only knew the God of this parable. How generous is God? How does God see us and equally distribute everything? Well, last week, as the many tributes for 9/11 were taking place, I happened to turn on the TV and I saw an interview with a woman. And this gave me a great metaphor, and it works well, I think, with the message of the gospel today. She was chosen as a heroic mother who single-handedly raised a large family after her husband was killed in the towers of 9/11. And all her children were doing very well in life. They were turning out to be good adults, with good jobs, families of their own. And the person interviewing her thought he had a really good handle on this. And he thought he would get this formula down. He said to the woman, kind of smugly, he said, I suppose you love all your children equally, making sure they all got the same treatment. And she surprised him. She said, no. I love them. She said, I love them all, each one of them, but not equally. And I think the interviewer was taken aback. And what she said really struck me. I don't have the exact words, but it was something like this. She said, I love the one that was down until he got up. I loved the one that was weak until she got strong. I loved the one that was depressed until he found hope. I loved the one that was hurt until she was healed. What's it like in God's world? What's it like in the kingdom? I think that mother's story is what it's like for God. It's what it's like in our relationship with God. We who hope and continue to hope that God will love us in our need and in our weakness. And you know something? I think we've all lived this parable. God comes to us late in our lives, And we come to God sometimes late. We wish we hadn't let so many days or months or years go by before we came to the realization that God was with us in our lives. And we tend to cling to the past. But today, God says it's only fair that you should get what I give to everyone. And so we're led today to the table of the Eucharist, where no one of us, no matter what we've done or no matter what we haven't done, is greater or lesser than another. No matter what office you hold, no matter what degree you have, no matter your economic status, when we come around this table, there is no first and no last. We are all one in Christ. So I think God would give us that penny. And I think it would take a lot less than a second. Let us take some time now to think about our need for God, our restlessness, until we rest in the heart of the one who gives us the courage